The massive alien warship hung in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud of doom. Its hull, covered in strange markings and battle scars, stretched for miles across the black canvas of space. Inside the command center, General Croth stood tall, his 4 eyes narrowing as he studied the blue planet below. "Such a primitive species," he growled, his scaled skin shifting colors from deep purple to an angry red. "They don't even have proper space defenses. This will be the easiest conquest yet." The bridge crew of his mighty vessel, the Star Crusher, worked silently at their stations. None dared to question their general's assessment. After all, Croth had led the Empire's forces to victory in over 50 planetary conquests. Earth's united military forces had gathered for an emergency meeting at the UN headquarters in New York. The alien ship had appeared 3 days ago, and all attempts at communication had been met with silence. That was, until now. The giant screens in the meeting hall crackled to life, showing General Croth's imposing figure. His voice boomed through the speakers, translated perfectly into Earth's languages. "People of Earth," he announced, contempt dripping from every word. "Your planet has been chosen for integration into the Empire. Your military capability is laughable. Your weapons are primitive. Your species is weak." The room erupted in angry protests, but Croth continued. "However, we are not completely without mercy. To prove our superiority and give you a chance to maintain some dignity, I propose a challenge." The room fell silent. "Send your best warrior to face one of our elite soldiers in combat. If your warrior wins, we will leave your planet in peace. If not..." He let the threat hang in the air. "You have 24 hours to decide." As the transmission ended, chaos erupted in the meeting hall. Military leaders argued about the best course of action, politicians demanded diplomatic solutions, and scientists insisted on analyzing the alien technology for weaknesses. But in a quiet corner of the room, Lieutenant James Miller stood up. He wasn't the highest-ranking officer, nor the most decorated soldier. But he had something that set him apart. He was humanity's most successful special operations operative, with a perfect record in impossible missions. "I'll do it," he said, his voice calm but firm. The room fell silent again as all eyes turned to him. General Thompson, the head of Earth's United Defense Force, studied Miller carefully. "Are you sure, Lieutenant? This isn't just about you. The fate of our entire planet could rest on this." Miller nodded. "That's exactly why I'm volunteering, sir. We can't risk sending someone who might hesitate. Someone who might second-guess themselves. I won't." As the military leaders debated Miller's offer, he stood quietly, his mind already preparing for what might be humanity's most important battle. He wasn't the biggest or strongest soldier, but he had something the aliens couldn't understand, the weight of 7 billion lives on his shoulders, and the determination to prove that humanity was anything but weak. The next few hours were spent in intense preparation. While the world's best scientists and military experts briefed Miller on everything they had learned about the alien physiology and technology, he remained focused and calm. They had no idea what kind of combat the aliens would choose, but Miller knew one thing: he would be ready for anything. As the sun set over New York, the decision was made official. Lieutenant James Miller would represent Earth in the challenge that would determine humanity's fate. The question now was, what kind of battle awaited him aboard the alien warship? The transport beam that brought Lieutenant Miller aboard the Star Crusher felt like ice running through his veins. He materialized in a massive chamber that seemed to serve as an arena. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadows, and the circular floor was made of some kind of metallic material he'd never seen before. Thousands of alien spectators filled the surrounding stands, their bodies of various shapes and sizes all focused on the human who dared to accept their challenge. Their murmurs echoed through the chamber like waves crashing against rocks. General Croth's voice boomed through the arena. "So, this is Earth's champion? He stood in a private viewing box, looking down at Miller with all four eyes. You send us a single, small warrior? This is even more insulting than I expected. Miller remained silent, taking in his surroundings with careful attention. His training had taught him that every detail could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The floor had a slight give to it, almost like rubber but harder. The air was thicker than Earth's, and the gravity felt about 20% stronger. Allow me to introduce your opponent, Croth announced with clear satisfaction. A massive door opened on the far side of the arena, and heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. Miller's heart rate didn't change as he watched a huge alien warrior emerge. The creature stood nearly 10 feet tall, its body covered in armor plates that seemed to be part of its natural biology. Its four arms each ended in deadly claws, and its head was protected by a bony crest. This is Commander Rax, one of our most decorated warriors. He has never lost a battle. Crotha's voice carried a note of cruel amusement. The rules are simple: fight until one warrior can no longer continue. Any weapons or fighting styles are allowed. Miller reached for his combat knife, the only weapon he'd been allowed to bring. The alien crowd erupted in laughter at the sight of the small blade. Commander Rax flexed all four arms, each one rippling with muscle mass that put Earth's strongest athletes to shame. A knife against natural armor? Rax's translated voice rumbled through the arena. Your species truly is primitive. Miller finally spoke, his voice calm and clear. Size isn't everything. Neither are weapons. Brave words from prey, Rax growled. I will try to make this quick, for mercy's sake. The alien warrior charged forward with surprising speed for his size. Miller stood his ground until the last possible moment, then moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent their entire life mastering the art of combat. Rax's claws sliced through empty air as Miller rolled beneath the attack, using the alien's momentum against him. In the same motion, Miller's knife found a gap between the natural armor plates near Rax's knee joint. The alien roared in pain and surprise. The crowd fell silent. First blood goes to the human, Croth announced, his voice carrying a note of surprise. Rax spun around, now moving more cautiously. His injured leg didn't seem to slow him down much, but his attack pattern had changed. He began circling Miller, using his superior reach to probe for weaknesses. Miller maintained his defensive stance, his breath steady and controlled despite the heavier gravity. He had already learned what he needed to know: the alien's armor wasn't complete coverage. There were gaps, just like any natural armor. And where there were gaps, there were opportunities. The real battle was about to begin, and Miller knew that the fate of Earth would depend on more than just strength or size. It would depend on skill, strategy, and the determination that had driven humanity to survive every challenge they'd ever faced. The air crackled with tension as Miller and Commander Rax circled each other. The alien warrior's initial confidence had been replaced by cautious respect after Miller's first successful strike. Dark blue blood dripped from the wound in Rax's knee joint, marking his path across the arena floor. You are more skilled than expected, human, Rax growled, his four arms moving in complex patterns designed to confuse and distract. But skill alone won't save you from superior evolution. Miller didn't respond. His eyes tracked every movement, noting how Rax favored his injured leg ever so slightly. The alien's natural armor plates shifted with his movements, revealing and concealing vulnerable spots in a rhythm Miller was beginning to understand. Suddenly, Rax launched a new attack. All four arms struck simultaneously, each from a different angle. The crowd roared as the massive claws seemed certain to tear the human apart. But Miller had been waiting for this. Instead of dodging backward as Rax expected, Miller dove forward, rolling between the alien's legs. His knife flashed twice, finding the gaps behind both of Rax's ankles. The alien commander stumbled, his leg armor now compromised in 3 places. Impossible. Rax bellowed, his voice mixing pain and rage. He spun around with surprising agility, but Miller was already out of reach. In his private box, General Croth leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. "Interesting," he muttered. "The human understands weak points. Perhaps they aren't as primitive as we thought." Back on Earth, millions watched the battle through the aliens' transmission. In homes, offices, and public squares, humanity held its collective breath. Military analysts studied Miller's techniques, already learning from how he fought against a superior opponent. Rax switched tactics, using his long reach to keep Miller at a distance. His claws slashed through the air in a constant barrage, forcing the human to stay defensive. "You can't win a battle of endurance, little warrior," Rax taunted. "This stronger gravity will tire you soon enough." Miller's breathing had indeed grown heavier, the increased gravity taking its toll. But his eyes remained sharp, his movements precise. He had trained in high-gravity chambers on Earth, pushing his body to its limits and beyond. This wasn't the first time he'd fought while exhausted. "Tell me, human," Rax continued his psychological assault, "what makes you think you can defeat a warrior bred for combat? Our species has conquered worlds for longer than your civilization has existed." Miller finally spoke, his voice steady despite his exertion. "Because we're not bred for combat." He ducked under another swing. "We choose it. We learn it. We master it. Not because it's in our DNA, but because we decide to." The alien commander laughed, but there was uncertainty in the sound. Something about the human's calm confidence was unsettling. "Pretty words won't save your species." "No," Miller agreed, shifting his stance slightly. "But this might." He threw his knife high into the air, the blade spinning and catching the arena's lights. Rax's 4 eyes automatically tracked the weapon, his warrior instincts unable to ignore the threat. In that split second of distraction, Miller charged. The crowd gasped as the human slammed his full body weight into Rax's injured knee. The alien commander toppled forward, off balance and suddenly vulnerable. As he fell, Miller caught his own knife and struck at the largest gap he'd identified in Rax's armor, right at the base of his neck. But Rax wasn't one of the Empire's most decorated warriors for nothing. One of his lower arms caught Miller in a devastating blow, sending the human flying across the arena floor. Both warriors hit the ground at the same time, both wounded, both realizing that this fight was far from over. Miller rolled to his feet, fighting through the pain from Rax's devastating blow. His ribs screamed in protest, but nothing felt broken, yet. The alien commander was also rising, blue blood now flowing from the fresh wound near his neck. Both warriors had drawn first blood, and both now knew this fight would end only when one of them could no longer stand. "Your strategy is impressive," Rax admitted, his 4 arms flexing as he reassessed his opponent. "But you've revealed your biggest weakness, you need to get close to do any damage. I won't allow that again." The alien commander began a new assault, but this time his attacks were different. Instead of trying to slash Miller with his claws, Rax started grabbing pieces of his own natural armor that had been loosened in the fight. With his immense strength, he broke off chunks and hurled them at Miller like missiles. The human's eyes widened as the first projectile whistled past his head at incredible speed. The second piece of armor crashed into the ground where he had been standing a split second before, leaving a small crater in the metallic floor. "Adaptability," Miller said between dodges, his voice still steady despite his exhaustion. "That's humanity's real strength. We learn. We change. We overcome." The alien crowd watched in fascination as the small human warrior weaved through the barrage of improvised weapons. Each movement was efficient, using the minimum energy needed to avoid being hit. Miller was conserving his strength, and everyone in the arena could see it. General Croth's color shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. "Commander Rax is right, the human needs to get close to win. But he's wrong about it being a weakness. The general's 4 eyes narrowed. It's a strategy. Miller continued his careful movement, getting closer to Rax step by step despite the constant barrage. The alien commander noticed this too late, realizing he had allowed himself to be backed into a corner of the arena. Enough! Rax roared. He charged forward again, all 4 arms extended to grab the human. I'll crush you with my bare hands. But this was exactly what Miller had been waiting for. Instead of retreating, he dropped and slid forward on the smooth arena floor, using the momentum from Rax's charge against him. His knife found another gap in the armor, this time along the alien side. Rax howled in pain but managed to grab Miller with one of his lower arms. He lifted the human high into the air, preparing to slam him into the ground with bone-crushing force. That's when Miller revealed another surprise. From a hidden pocket in his uniform, he pulled out a small handful of earth dirt he had brought with him. As Rax brought him down for the killing blow, Miller threw the dirt into all 4 of the aliens' eyes. The crowd gasped. It was such a simple tactic, almost primitive, and completely unexpected. Rax's grip loosened as he instinctively tried to clear his vision, giving Miller the opening he needed to break free. You dare use such dishonorable tactics? Rax bellowed, his eyes blinking rapidly. Honor is for practice rings, Miller replied, moving into position for his next strike. This is about survival. My entire species is watching this fight. Counting on me. I'll use every advantage I can get. In his viewing box, General Croth found himself nodding with growing respect. Now I understand, he said quietly. They're not just warriors. They're survivors. Every human carries the weight of their entire species' determination to live, to progress, to win. The battle had entered its final phase, and both combatants knew it. Rax's superior strength and natural weapons were now matched against Miller's tactical thinking and willingness to do whatever it took to win. The question was, which would prove stronger, evolution or determination? The arena had fallen silent except for the heavy breathing of both warriors. Rax had finally cleared the dirt from his eyes, but the delay had cost him. His movements were slower now, the multiple wounds inflicted by Miller's precise strikes taking their toll. Blue blood marked his path across the arena floor, leaving a maze-like pattern that told the story of their battle. Miller wasn't in much better shape. The stronger gravity made every movement a struggle, and his ribs throbbed where Rax had struck him. But his eyes remained sharp, his mind clear. He had trained for situations exactly like this, fighting while exhausted, injured, and against overwhelming odds. You fight like a cornered animal, Rax growled, his 4 arms moving in defensive patterns. No honor, no pride, just desperate survival. You're right, Miller replied, circling slowly to conserve energy. That's what you don't understand about humans. We're not warriors because we love battle. We're warriors because we refuse to disappear. The alien commander launched another attack, but this time Miller saw something new in his opponent's movements, desperation. Rax's natural confidence had been shaken by the human's continued survival and successful strikes. In his viewing box, General Croth leaned forward, his color shifting to a deep green of realization. The human isn't just fighting Rax, he muttered. He's teaching us a lesson. Back on Earth, military analysts were frantically recording every detail of the fight. They watched how Miller used his smaller size to his advantage, how he targeted weak points, how he combined traditional combat techniques with unexpected tactics. If humanity survived this day, these lessons would become part of their training for generations to come. Rax suddenly changed tactics again, dropping to all 6s, using his 4 arms and 2 legs to charge like a massive predatory beast. The move was unexpected, showing a level of adaptability that surprised even General Croth. But Miller didn't panic. Instead, he waited until the last possible moment, then used Rax's own armor against him. The damaged plates that the commander had been pulling off to throw now became handholds. Miller grabbed one, swinging himself up onto the alien's back as Rax charged past. "Get off!" Rax roared, his 4 arms trying to reach behind him. But Miller had positioned himself perfectly, right in the blind spot between the commander's shoulder blades. "You want to know the real difference between us?" Miller said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "You fight because you believe you're superior. We fight because we know we're not." With that, he drove his knife deep into the gap he'd created earlier near Rax's neck. The blade found its mark with surgical precision, severing crucial nerves. The alien commander's legs gave out, and he crashed to the arena floor with earth-shaking force. The crowd erupted in chaos. Nothing like this had ever happened in the Empire's history. An alien warrior, using primitive weapons and seemingly simple tactics, had brought down one of their greatest commanders. Miller rolled clear of Rax's falling body, coming up in a defensive stance despite his exhaustion. The alien commander tried to rise but found his legs wouldn't respond. The human strike had been perfectly placed. "How?" Rax asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "How did you know where to strike?" "Because we study. We learn. We prepare." Miller stood straight, facing the commander with respect. "Every weakness, every vulnerability, we find them all. Not because we're naturally gifted, but because we have to." The arena remained silent as General Croth descended from his viewing box, his massive form floating down on an anti-gravity platform. The general's color had shifted to a deep gold, a sign of profound thought in his species. He landed near the 2 warriors, his 4 eyes taking in every detail of the scene. Commander Rax lay partially paralyzed but conscious, his proud features twisted in a mix of pain and disbelief. Miller stood nearby, still gripping his blood-stained knife, his stance ready despite his obvious exhaustion. The stronger gravity of the ship seemed to press down on him with extra force now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "In all my years leading the Empire's forces," Croth began, his voice echoing through the arena, "I have never seen anything quite like this." He turned to face the video transmitters, knowing his words were being broadcast to both his fleet and to Earth. "We came here expecting to find weakness. Instead, we found something else entirely." Miller remained silent, watching the general carefully. His knife hadn't wavered, even in the presence of the alien leader. 7 billion lives still depended on how the next few moments played out. "Tell me, human," Croth continued, "your species has no natural armor, no significant physical advantages. You are smaller than many of your own planet's creatures. How did you become the dominant species on your world?" Miller took a deep breath, wincing slightly at his injured ribs. "The same way I won this fight, General. We observe. We learn. We adapt. Every challenge makes us stronger, not because we're born strong, but because we choose to become strong." From his position on the ground, Rax spoke up, his voice carrying a new note of respect. "He knew every weakness in my armor. Every vulnerable spot. He had studied our kind before the fight even began." "Of course I did," Miller replied. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't our bodies, it's our minds. We don't just fight battles. We solve problems. And right now, our problem is survival." General Croth's color shifted again, this time to a bright silver of decision. "Your species is young compared to ours. Your technology is less advanced. Your bodies are more fragile. By all logical measures, you should be weak." He paused, his 4 eyes focusing intently on Miller. "But logic, it seems, doesn't tell the whole story." The general raised his voice, addressing the entire arena and all those watching the transmission. "The Empire has conquered many worlds, but we have never encountered a species quite like humanity. You turn your very weaknesses into strengths. Your lack of natural advantages drives you to create artificial ones. Your smaller size makes you more agile, your fragility makes you more cautious, and your shorter lifespans make you more determined. Miller finally lowered his knife slightly. Does this mean Earth is safe? More than that, Croth replied. It means the Empire has much to learn from humanity. Your victory today has proven that strength comes in many forms, and that underestimating any species is a dangerous mistake. The alien crowd began to murmur, then to cheer. They were warriors, after all, and they could recognize and respect skill and courage when they saw it. Commander Rax, despite his injuries, managed to raise one of his arms in a gesture of respect toward Miller. The Empire keeps its word, General Croth announced. Earth will remain free. But I would propose something more, an alliance. Your species has much to teach us about adaptation, innovation, and the true nature of strength. 3 months after the historic battle aboard the Star Crusher, Lieutenant James Miller stood at a podium in the newly constructed Interstellar Alliance headquarters in Geneva. The massive building featured architecture that blended human and alien design, symbolizing the unprecedented partnership that had formed between Earth and the Empire. Commander Rax, now fully recovered thanks to advanced Empire medical technology, sat in the front row. The natural armor plates on his massive frame bore new scars from their battle, which he wore with pride. Next to him, General Croth's scales shimmered with the golden color of satisfaction as they watched Miller address the gathered delegates from both civilizations. 3 months ago, I stepped onto an alien battlefield carrying nothing but a knife and a handful of dirt, Miller began, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. I wasn't fighting for glory or conquest. I was fighting for humanity's right to exist, to grow, to determine our own future. The chamber was filled with both humans and aliens, all listening intently. The battle had been watched by billions across both civilizations, and its impact had transformed the relationship between their species. What we learned that day wasn't just about combat, Miller continued. We learned that true strength isn't about natural advantages or superior technology. It's about the will to overcome challenges, the determination to survive, and the wisdom to learn from every experience. General Croth stood up, his massive form drawing all eyes in the chamber. The Empire has ruled the stars for millennia, he announced, but in one day, humanity taught us something we had forgotten. Evolution gave us armor, strength, and natural weapons. But it was our reliance on these gifts that had become our greatest weakness. Commander Rax nodded in agreement. We had stopped adapting, stopped learning, stopped growing. We believed we were superior simply because of what we were born with. Humanity showed us that true strength comes from what you choose to become. Miller stepped down from the podium as General Croth took his place. The human and alien warriors had developed a deep respect for each other over the past months, working together to forge this new alliance. Today, Croth declared, we sign the first treaty between the Empire and Earth. But this is more than just a peace agreement. It is a commitment to learn from each other. Humanity will gain access to our advanced technology, and in return, they will teach us their methods of adaptation, innovation, and problem-solving. The chamber erupted in applause as representatives from both species came forward to sign the historic document. Military leaders, scientists, and diplomats from both civilizations had worked tirelessly to create an agreement that would benefit both sides. Later that evening, Miller stood on the headquarters observation deck, looking up at the stars. Commander Rax joined him, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence. Do you know what the greatest irony is? Rax asked, standing beside the human who had defeated him. By calling humanity weak, we forced you to prove just how strong you really are. Miller smiled. Strength isn't about never falling down. It's about always getting back up. That's something humanity learned through countless challenges, defeats, and victories. Now we can face the future together, combining your natural gifts with our adaptability. Above them, the Star Crusher hung in orbit alongside Earth's new fleet of hybrid vessels, their designs combining Empire technology with human innovation. They were symbols of a new era, one where different kinds of strength would work together to create something greater than either civilization could achieve alone. The universe is vast, Miller said, and full of challenges we can't even imagine yet. But together, we'll be ready for whatever comes next. Commander Rax raised one of his 4 arms in agreement. And any species that underestimates us will learn the same lesson we did, that true strength comes in many forms, and the greatest power lies not in what you are, but in what you choose to become.